What is going on, everybody? This is Johnny with Sierra Whiskey Co., and today we're going to discuss the significance of this picture and an article The Atlantic put out with a bombastic title, which was The Great Fake Child Sex Trafficking Epidemic. In case you didn't recognize the women in the photo, the one on the right is Ghislaine Maxwell, or Ghislaine, or I don't know how you pronounce it. She just got convicted on charges including sex trafficking and conspiracy relating to the recruitment of teenage girls for Jeffrey Epstein to sexually abuse. The woman on the left may be harder to recognize, but that's Laurene Jobs. She's the widow of Steve Jobs, yes, the Steve Jobs who founded Apple. Laurene Jobs is a founder and executive at Emerson Collective. As of 2017, the Emerson Collective just so happens to own a majority interest in The Atlantic, but I'm sure the picture and that fact have nothing to do with what we're about to go over. Human trafficking is one of those hard-to-stomach subjects. Most people don't want to even begin to think about it. For most, it's just too disturbing. Though our denial of a problem does little to fix it in almost all instances, it just makes it worse. Recently, The Atlantic released that article, again called The Great Fake Child Sex Trafficking Epidemic by Caitlin Tiffany. The print version will go by another name and will be released for the January-February 2022 issue. As most have probably gleaned by now, a lot of media, especially legacy media and older larger companies, if you will, have been reduced to writing inflammatory as well as extra sensational titles. Essentially clickbait. When you go to consume one of these articles, you typically find an amalgamation of nonsensical points, oftentimes something completely unrelated to the title. In short, drivel. Many of you may not know that our company, Sierra Whiskey Co., takes a portion of our profits and donates them to veteran-run nonprofit organizations that are helping in the fight against human trafficking. It's something we feel needs to be addressed. You can find out more about the organizations that we donate to on our website. That's part of the reason why this Atlantic article really stuck in our proverbial craw. The article is linked in the description if you'd like to read it yourself, but allow us to summarize her position. Caitlin Tiffany, the author who is known primarily as a tech writer, simply surmises that human trafficking is bad, but just not as bad as everyone thinks. It's hard to tell exactly her intent. One moment she seems like she's writing a hit piece on Operation Underground Railroad, often seen as the acronym OUR, or OUR, one of the more popular groups that are fighting against human trafficking. And the next moment, she's making light of a disturbing subsect of crime while branding the volunteers she encountered at an event as detached from reality. In it, she uses every dismissive subject in an odd attempt to tarnish legitimacy. Among these things is approximating those she encountered with the QAnon group, upplaying the common person's expectation of the scope of human trafficking, then downplaying with statistics. Then she goes on to quote a woman she encountered about such subjects as Jeffrey Epstein and Hillary Clinton. The author goes out of her way to mention that Epstein didn't. Oh, wait. He did commit suicide, but fails to mention how Bill Clinton happened to fly on his airplane 26 times. Other played out mentions, which seem to have no real place in the article, are things like anti-vaxxers, anti-maskers, illegal organ harvesting, things about not so long ago elections, bunk virus cures, and the MyPillow guy, Mike Lindell. It's as if going into this, she meant to throw the kitchen sink at the subject. The whole radical playbook of discrediting. In using these tactics, an instant dismissal of validity is almost assumed by the author and thereby the reader. This hollow strategy is becoming more and more transparent these days. Just put the phrase conspiracy theory with anything, and it's like a cheat code for instant debunking. Surprisingly, no mention of Russian collusion in this article. The article goes on to focus more on our rescue, or you are, and their anti-trafficking efforts. She zeroes in on the founder, Tim Ballard. She takes care to mention that Ballard worked for the CIA and DHS and notes that those organizations wouldn't provide his employment record to her without written permission, which he did not provide. At this point, you start to wonder what alternate reality she is living in, as if one of the most secretive organizations on the planet just wantonly divulges their documents and past employment history to a tech writer for The Atlantic. A direct quote from the article in reference to "It quickly made its name conducting sting operations overseas in which Ballard, or a colleague, posed often hammily as an American pedophile." End quote. In case anyone was unsure, Merriam-Webster defines hammily as marked by exaggerated and usually self-conscious theatrically. In other words, somewhat stagey, theatrical, or see also dramatic. Truly odd that this woman should be an expert on how American pedophiles do or should act. Bad marks for Tim Ballard's acting. Everyone knows a real American pedophile acts much more demure and understated. The article then goes on to cast aspersions on the Our organization. In a matter of a few sentences, the author states one law enforcement agency said that it was not worth the trouble being associated with the organization, as the donations were not particularly useful. In other words, insubstantial. Then it mentioned that the Davis County, Utah District Attorney has opened a criminal investigation of the organization about misleading statements and exaggerations on fundraising materials. Due to this, the Utah Attorney General's office cut ties, but that's after receiving $950,000 over 4 years from them. It is strangely contradictory to note that they aren't giving enough money and then also showing that they gave quite a lot of money. It's almost as if there is intent to sully, regardless of a cohesive direction. Stated otherly, as long as it sounds negative, who cares if it makes much sense? Now, Sierra Whiskey Co. has no affiliation with Operation Underground Railroad nor Tim Ballard. Though through the grapevine we have heard favorable remarks. That being said, if there is some sort of misconduct, it definitely deserves to be investigated. If nothing is found, then hopefully no harm is done, and if there is, justice is served. One thing we believe should be challenged is what the title of this article asserts, that the epidemic of human trafficking is in any way fake. To state as such is insanely damaging to a much ignored cause. Regardless of what the final tally on the numbers happen to be, there's been an extreme focus on the color of one's skin these past couple years and beliefs in systemic issues that perhaps are or are assumed to be remnants of bygone slavery. The Atlantic has had many articles discussing racism of that sort, but choose to publish one downplaying current, real, and growing modern-day slavery. It is not only absurd, but downright shameful. Let's look at some interesting things that seem to fly in the face of what this article states. In 2015, a study funded by the Department of Justice, done by the University of San Diego and Point Loma Nazarene University, found that 8,000 underage victims fall prey to sex traffickers in San Diego County annually, which nets an estimated $810 million of revenue per year. A lot of the recruitment was happening directly on school campuses, and it's estimated that 20 to 40 million people worldwide are currently slaves. These figures are often referred to as the hidden figures of crime because the vast majority of these instances aren't detected or cataloged. Annually, it's thought that the global profits of human trafficking are roughly $150 billion, with $99 billion of that likely coming from commercial sexual exploitation. Think about that. If it were a fake epidemic, it would surely make less money than the largest company in the world, which coincidentally happens to be Apple Inc., who netted $94.7 billion in 2021. If you add the net income of Microsoft and Google, who were respectively second and third largest earners that year, that would equal $138.5 billion, still $11.5 billion shy of the global profits of human trafficking. That's no small problem. These human trafficking victims can be any age or gender, but it disproportionately affects women and children. They comprise about 71% of the victims. So let's say we take some data from the National Human Trafficking Hotline, which has some of the most extensive data on trafficking within the U.S. The data sets for 2021 show that Nevada was the state with the highest rate of incidence. It had 7.5 cases per 100,000 people. It's the equivalent of your chances of dying from electrocution or radiation, extreme temperatures. That's about 1 in 13,000. Now, that might not seem like strong odds, but included in those 100,000 are an enormous amount of what would be considered low value or potentially non-targets by human traffickers. These non-targets could be demographics that are older, appear to be able to handle themselves, men perhaps, those which don't meet an appearance or age standard, etc. So, for example, women comprise 49.8% of the population of Nevada, and minors comprise 22.5%. Being that 71% of the victims are women and children, the rate of abduction will shift dramatically, accounting for these factors. So at first glance, it doesn't seem that high, but it doesn't really tell the whole story. Furthermore, that data is based on instances reported, so it's far from the actual numbers. As we've already mentioned, trafficking tends to be a hidden figure in crime. Though the author of the article we've been looking at ultimately delivers a very soft-serve agreeance that modern-day slavery is not such a good thing, she does nothing but damage and dismiss quite a few people who are fighting the good fight, effectively branding them as conspiracy theorists, but later mentioning in the last handful of lines they were warm and friendly, the kind of people you'd hope to have around if you got a flat tire or had a fainting spell. That's a direct quote. It's a strange apology for earlier calling them a bunch of loons, effectively. It's highly probable she would change her tune if her, or potentially one of her loved ones, had experienced these horrors firsthand. She didn't bother to interview or interact with any victims of human trafficking for the article, or if she did, there was no mention included. This is somewhat of a synchronistic time for The Atlantic to release this article. It coincides with the Ghislaine Maxwell trial wrapping up, 2 CNN employees being revealed as pedophiles, and also just so happens to fall directly within the National Human Trafficking Prevention Month, which is January, or this month. So please don't take me as a conspiracy theorist. Life just happens to have loads of happy, or perhaps in this case, unhappy coincidences. Again, this picture and the fact that Laureen Jobs owns the Emerson Collective, which owns The Atlantic, I'm sure has absolutely nothing to do with this article. Regardless of all these facts and figures, human trafficking is a despicable thing. There's a need for good people to actively engage against it, even if it were only a small number of instances. This modern-day slavery is so immoral and horrific that it deserves in no way to be diminished. The majority of people made truly aware of what these poor souls are subjected to are quickly made sick to their stomachs. This is likely a prime reason a lot of people choose to ignore the issue, as it's too much for their psyche. Just moral people have a hard time stomaching this. However, those with good in our hearts must bravely choose to face the evil at hand. If not, only more darkness shall encroach. You can report suspected human trafficking by calling 911 or through the National Human Trafficking Resource Center at 1-888-373-7888. You can support the groups we support who are fighting human trafficking, those such as Guardian Group and Covenant Rescue Group, by visiting our mission page, or support them indirectly by purchasing our products from our website. Keep on fighting the good fight.